may or may not have heard of the Chief Executive Officer of Australian airline Qantas Airways / active LGBTI advocate, Alan Joyce. Yes, the one who was embroiled in the 2011 Qantas industrial dispute, but we'll talk about that later. Let's get to know him first. Originally from Ireland, Joyce graduated from Dublin Institute of Technology and Trinity College with honours in Bachelor of Science. He then started his professional career in aviation, where he worked 8 years at Aer Lingus, then joined Ansett Australia from 1996 to 2000. He ultimately joined Qantas in the year 2000, heading the Network of Planning, Schedules Planning, and Network Strategy, and became the founding CEO of Jetstar, Qantas' low-cost carrier subsidiary, from 2003 to 2008. He was eventually appointed CEO and Managing Director of Qantas in November 2008. So what happened during the 2011 Qantas industrial disputes? It started in 2010 when the three unions, Australian Licensed Aircraft Engineers Association, Transport Workers Union, and Australian and International Pilots Association, started negotiating for an increase in wages, better working conditions, and enhanced job security. This conflicted with Joyce's pay rise in September 2011, causing major disappointment and backlash, as it showed disconnect between the senior management and their employees. On the 29th of October 2011, Joyce ordered the grounding of the international and domestic fleets in an attempt to solve the industrial actions by his employees. The grounding affected an estimate of 70,000 passengers, 3,000 employees, and over 600 cancelled flights. This cost Qantas $194 million Australian dollars, as reported to the Australian Securities Exchange. Despite all this, Joyce was named as the most influential business leader by the Australian newspaper in 2011. So how did his leadership land him that title, and what caused all this controversy?
On 29 October 2011, Alan Joyce made the drastic decision to ground Qantas' entire fleet, locking out union employees from work without pay. Joyce's main aim with this action was to have the suspended staff see themselves relent in court on issues that they have been fighting for, such as pay increases. Ending the controlling power that, according to the management, the carriers' unions had, was also a goal trying to be reached by this unbelievable action. According to Joyce, the three unions involved in the dispute were trying to dictate the way the management ran the company, and for that to change was an essential goal of his actions. While getting an abundance of criticism on this radical action, some industry leaders applauded his bravery for standing up for his company. The AirAsia co-founder and CEO Tony Fernandez tweeted,
"You have to salute Alan Joyce for what he's doing. This is not about workers versus management. It's about survival in the modern world."
Grounding the fleet had an enormous impact on over 100 mainline domestic and international aircrafts around the world in Qantas' portfolio. Despite grounding the fleets operationally, Joyce promised Qantas would assist stranded passengers with accommodation and try to get them onto other airlines to complete their journeys. Grounding the flights during the 2011 industrial dispute was an action going against his mainly transformational methods of leading with compassion and achieving high productivity levels while encouraging engagement. These skills can be seen through his public support of social causes such as LGBTQ and Indigenous rights, and while delivering masterclasses. Instead, his decision was a rather great example of displaying transactional leadership skills. He took a step back from caring about the personal development and motivation of his staff and pushed a punishment onto the unions if they did not do as he wished, ergo to come to an agreement as soon as possible. Looking at it from a theoretical point of view, the main element of any transactional leadership model is the exchange between leaders and followers, reward for work and equally the opposite. Therefore, it is safe to say that by forcing the union to come to an agreement by grounding the entire fleet, he acted within the transactional leadership framework. Contrary to transformational leadership, where a connection established between leader and follower is what causes motivation and a better work morale. Furthermore, a transactional leader does not individualize followers' needs, per se, does not prioritize their personal development. Joyce's action was not an ethically narcissistic act, as he was prioritizing the goals of the company and saving the brand with the least monetary damage caused. Joyce came into the CEO position just after the negotiations of 2008. Thus, he had experienced previously poorly managed negotiations and the adverse effects it had on the company. Afraid of losing competitive advantage to Asian and Middle Eastern airlines and network carriers due to high cost base, he believed that the costs of long-haul operations had to be kept low and had to be even further lowered for Qantas to have a safe and successful future. Therefore, it can be argued that his radical decision was made with saving the jobs of the staff and union members in mind by implementing transactional leadership methods and ultimately increasing efficiency in negotiations. Transformational and transactional methods of leadership are interlinking. Therefore, when analyzing Joyce's actions, looking at both and how they are connected is an important aspect. Bayes focused on the followers' needs rather than the leaders by proposing the theory that transformational leadership could also be applied to situations with negative outcomes alongside the suggestion to describe transactional and transformational leadership as a single continuum. Bayes also added a new perspective by stating that while charisma is necessary for transformational leadership, it is not sufficient. Transactional and transformational leadership methods build on the 7 factors listed here. Contingent reward, referring to the previously discussed exchange between the leader and followers, and management by exception accounting for the corrective criticism given by the leader, can both be linked back to Alan Joyce's decision to ground the fleet. To bring an end to the ongoing negotiations, to show his opinion about the way and speed of coming to a solution, and using his power, he has taken corrective action by forcing the FWA to intervene and push the parties towards an agreement, avoiding the dispute to cause any harm to the national economy. It can be argued, however, that due to the unilateral nature of his decisions, a showcase of transformational leadership characteristics can be seen as well. According to Northouse, transformational leadership can be criticized for its elitist and anti-democratic features. Leaders acting within this method are often found in central role of creating changes and guiding the business in new directions, which gives the impression that the leader is acting independently. Within 1 hour of the Qantas announcement, the government applied for an emergency meeting at Fair Work Australia to try to solve the dispute. The Transport Minister, Anthony Albanese, said that the government had only been advised of the decision to ground the fleet 3 hours before it happened. The heroic leadership bias, a term used by Yukel, criticizes the downfall of the actions of transformational leaders as it focuses on the leader influencing followers, but fails to acknowledge the reciprocatory nature of influence. With more attention on how followers may challenge the leader's vision, the vision and new direction of the company may be more representative of needs from both leader and follower. In making this chain of decisions, Joyce has arguably abused his power as a leader, proving the theoretical criticism on this aspect of transformational leadership. Moving the business to a new direction, according to him, could possibly be a wrong direction for other members of the company, in this case, the unionists. Other circumstances of the event may suggest that during the dispute with the union and the actions that he took that led to the crisis, he made questionable decisions, such as asking for a pay rise, which will be further discussed later. However, the company's goals have been met as a consequence of his well-critiqued action. Despite all the criticism on his radical move, he is described as Australia's most bewitching business leader, who stood up to unions and cynics and who corrected the carrier's financial freefall almost overnight.
However, there is always a dark side to leadership. In September 2011, a general meeting was held where the request for senior executives to get a pay rise was made. In particular, Alan Joyce requested to increase his pay from $3 million to $5 million per year. The pay rise requests were accepted by shareholders, resulting in much disappointment and backlash from both the public and trade unions. This brings about the concept of pseudo-transformational leadership, which demonstrates the destructive and toxic side of leadership, where the leader uses leadership for personal ends. Such leaders may exhibit various traits of transformational leaders, but aim to cater to their own self-interest in the long run. To evaluate Alan Joyce's action, we can refer to the two-dimensional framework for authentic and pseudo-transformational leadership. According to Aristotle, there are two main types of pseudo-transformational leaders, but we will focus on incontinent pseudo-transformational leaders. These are leaders who have some commitment to altruistic values, but nevertheless act against them to satisfy self-interest. Though these leaders can be motivated by values that reflect the interests of others, the altruistic values can sometimes be insufficient when their temptation to act egotistically is stronger. These leaders see themselves as honest and supportive of their organization's mission, but can still act in ways that are inconsistent and unreliable. Alan Joyce falls under the category of incontinent pseudo-transformational leadership, as he does have altruistic values that support Qantas's overall mission. However, in certain situations, he acted according to his self-interest, in this case requesting for a pay rise. Ethically failed leaders recognize that their conduct is not grounded in altruistic values, but they still engage in this conduct nonetheless in the belief that this is in their self-interest to do so. In trying to reason or even justify his action, we have to step inside Alan Joyce's shoes amidst the chaos of the industrial dispute and consider the perspective of ethics, in particular, virtue and morals. In leadership, ethics is concerned with what leaders do and the virtues that guide their behaviors and actions. In any decision-making situation, ethics are implicitly or explicitly involved. As CEO, Alan Joyce is the face and representative of Qantas, holding the highest authority within the organization. Thus, his choice to request for a pay rise sent waves of unrest not only amongst Qantas employees, but also within the 3 trade unions as it directly opposes their fight for higher wages. Followers may view Alan Joyce's action as highly selfish and egoistic in nature. The distinguishing feature of egoism is that the end goals of one's actions are purely self-directed as an end in and of themselves. Psychological egoism, in particular, states that humans will always act to promote their own self-interest, with concern for one's welfare outweighing all others. He is more concerned with monetary gains rather than focusing on overcoming Qantas's difficulties, which adds fuel to the fire, as one of the defining factors of the 2011 industrial action was the fight for higher wages across all 3 unions. In this scenario, since it was reported that he was underpaid as compared to the previous year, he would thus feel that his contributions were not adequately compensated. To Alan, he was seeking justice for his own rights in terms of higher wages for the amount of work he had done for Qantas, given the company's state when he assumed the position as CEO. Furthermore, Alan Joyce was diagnosed with prostate cancer in April 2011, received treatment and a short 2 weeks after, returned to the office to continue work. Thus, this could have fueled his desire for a higher pay, as despite his poor health in 2011, he pushed on in continuing his role as CEO. However, in considering the virtues of an ethical leader, based on the writings of Aristotle, a moral person exhibits the virtues of modesty, fairness, and self-control. In this situation, Alan Joyce does not demonstrate these virtues and instead was consumed with greed and self-interest, turning a blind eye to the magnitude and context of the industrial dispute. Looking at the positives of using ethics to evaluate leadership, the theories and frameworks provide a body of timely research on ethical issues. There is a high demand for moral leadership in today's society, and thus, ethics is increasingly prominent in today's day and age. For example, CSR emerges amidst increasing ethical concerns over the negative impacts of the hospitality and tourism industry, such as air pollution and waste production. Thus, the actions and decisions made by leaders of organizations must now involve ethical considerations. Moreover, while considering the perspective of morals and virtues, we can make sense of the logical reasoning behind the actions and behaviors of leaders by evaluating their mindset driving their actions. Since modern normative ethics is concerned with the resolution of moral dilemmas, ethical theories can then guide individuals to think critically about their values and thereafter make rational decisions. However, ethical leadership is an area of research in its early stage of development, and therefore lacks a strong body of traditional research findings to substantiate it. Most studies today are focused on business ethics rather than leadership ethics. Leadership ethics lack the traditional kind of empirical support that usually accompanies accepted theories of human behavior. Above all, ethics is a matter of perspective and can be highly subjective depending on which theory is applied to the given situation or context. For example, in view of ethical egoism, Alan Joyce's request for a pay rise is justified, as he is concerned with remuneration for his efforts in running the company. On the other hand, considering virtue ethics, Joyce's actions are condemnable, as they do not meet the set of values associated with an ethical leader as stated by Aristotle.
In conclusion, leadership theories aid us in understanding the actions and behaviors through the styles and approaches taken by individuals. However, as seen in the case of Alan Joyce, leaders exhibit different forms of leadership styles depending on the course of action needed for each situational context. Thus, to be an effective leader, it is important to recognize and know what approach to use in order to yield the ideal results.